He gave his last horse to a wounded Apache girl. At sunrise her sisters came. The first light of dawn stretched slowly across the Arizona desert, turning the vast stretches of sand and rock into soft shades of gold and pink. The air was crisp, carrying the quiet hum of morning. Birds began to stir, and the distant hills glowed faintly under the rising sun. In that quiet stillness, Thomas rode his last horse along a narrow trail that wound between the rocky outcrops. The horse, an old but steady companion, moved carefully over the uneven ground, its hooves making soft sounds against the dusty earth. Thomas had always loved the desert at this time of day, when the world seemed calm and the day's troubles had not yet arrived. But this morning felt different. There was a strange tension in the air, a sense that something unusual awaited him along the path. He rode slowly, scanning the horizon for movement. The desert could be deceptive. Shadows shifted as the sun climbed, and shapes could appear and disappear in an instant. Thomas had learned to trust his instincts, honed over years of living in the harsh, open land. He had come to understand the desert's rhythms, the wind that whispered through the rocks, the sudden call of an eagle overhead, the way the light would change in the blink of an eye. Pace. And that morning something made him slow his pace even more, as if the desert itself was trying to warn him. It was then that he saw her, a small figure, hunched near a rocky outcrop, barely moving. At first, he thought it was a coyote or some other animal. But as he drew closer, he realized it was a human, a young girl, lying on the ground, her small frame trembling. Her clothing was torn and dirty, and there was a streak of dried blood on her leg. Breaths. She seemed weak, almost fading into the desert sand, as if the earth itself were trying to swallow her. Thomas felt a surge of concern. He had always known the desert could be cruel, but to see someone in such a vulnerable state struck him deeply. He approached cautiously, not wanting to startle her, yet knowing he had to act quickly. "Hey there," he said gently, keeping his voice calm and soft. "Can you hear me?" The girl's eyes fluttered open, revealing a mix of fear and pain. Thomas dismounted, tying the reins of his horse to a nearby rock. Every movement was careful, deliberate. He did not want to frighten her. He knelt down beside her and reached into his bag for water. Breath. Holding the small tin cup to her lips, he waited patiently while she drank slowly, her hands shaking around the metal. As she drank, Thomas examined her injuries. The cut on her leg was deep, and she winced whenever he touched it. He tore a strip from his shirt and began to carefully wrap it around the wound, doing his best to stop the bleeding. "You're going to be okay," he said softly, though he knew the desert could be unforgiving. "We'll get you somewhere safe." She looked up at him, her eyes wide and filled with a mixture of trust and uncertainty. It was a fragile trust, the kind that could break with a single wrong move. But Thomas felt it, and he knew he could not leave her there. The girl's breathing was shallow, and Thomas realized she would not be able to walk far, not in her condition. His heart sank a little as he thought about his own situation. He had only one horse left, an animal he had relied on for months to carry supplies and help with his work. Yet now he faced a choice that weighed heavily on him. He could keep the horse and continue on his journey, or he could give it to her and hope it would carry her to safety. Thomas studied her face, seeing both fear and hope reflected in her eyes. Desperate. He knew what he had to do. Gently, he lifted her to her feet, supporting her under the arms. She was light and fragile, and her small body trembled as she stood. Thomas guided her toward the horse, speaking softly the entire way. "Hold on tight," he said, breath. "This will help you get away from here." She nodded, barely able to speak, but her eyes followed his every movement. Thomas reached out and helped her onto the horse's back, adjusting the blanket beneath her so she would not slip. The horse shifted slightly under her weight, but remained calm, sensing the urgency of the moment. Once she was settled, Thomas handed her the reins. "Ride carefully," he instructed. "Go as far as you can and don't look back." She grasped the reins tightly, her fingers white with tension. Her eyes met his for a moment, and in that silent glance a bond was formed. A connection between two strangers brought together by circumstance, courage, and compassion. Thomas stepped back, watching her small figure against the rising sun, the horse moving slowly at first, then picking up speed as she gained confidence. The desert stretched endlessly before them, a place of both danger and beauty. Thomas watched until she disappeared over the distant hills, feeling an emptiness settle in his chest. The wind whispered through the rocks, and the morning sun grew warmer, but the stillness around him felt heavier than before. He knew he had done what he could, yet the thought of leaving her behind, alone in such a vast place, weighed on him. Still, there was a sense of relief, knowing that she had a chance to survive. Walking back toward his cabin, Thomas's mind replayed the moment over and over. The way she had looked at him, the trust in her eyes, the fragile way she had held on to the horse. He realized that in that small act, he had made a choice that mattered more than anything else he had done that morning. The desert had a way of testing people, of pushing them to the edge and revealing what they were capable of. Wrath. Thomas had faced one of those tests, and he had chosen compassion. By the time he reached the familiar path that led home, the sun was fully risen, bathing the desert in golden light. The world seemed ordinary again, yet Thomas felt a subtle shift within himself. He knew that his life had intersected with another in a way that would leave a lasting mark. The girl, riding his horse, was now part of a story larger than either of them. Brett. And though he did not know what the future held, he carried with him the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had acted with kindness in a moment when it truly mattered. Even as he settled into his routine, tending to the small garden and repairing the fences around his cabin, Thomas could not stop thinking about her. He imagined her journey through the desert, imagining the strength it would take to keep going, patient. And in those thoughts, he felt a quiet hope, a hope that the desert, which could be so harsh and unforgiving, might also allow for survival, trust, and the unexpected grace of human connection. The day stretched on, warm and bright, but Thomas's thoughts lingered on the girl he had helped. He understood, perhaps for the first time, that courage was not always about fighting or defending. Sometimes it was about giving something precious away, trusting that it would make a difference, and hoping that compassion could survive in a world that often seemed indifferent. That morning, in the light of the rising sun, Thomas had learned that lesson, and it would stay with him for the rest of his life. The girl rode as fast as she could through the desert, her small hands gripping the reins tightly. The horse was strong and steady, carrying her over rocky paths and sandy stretches with surprising endurance. Her legs ached from the wound, and each movement caused a sharp sting, but she did not stop, breaking. She knew she had to get away, and the thought of safety urged her forward with every step. Behind her, the rising sun cast long shadows across the desert, and the wind whispered in her ears, carrying the scent of sagebrush and the dry earth.
At first, she felt fear almost constantly.
Reshi had never trusted outsiders, yet the man who had given her the horse had shown her kindness. His calm voice, the way he had carefully lifted her onto the horse, and the gentle reassurance that she would survive. It all played over in her mind. Breath. She did not understand why he had done it, why someone who knew nothing of her life had taken such a risk. But as the horse moved swiftly beneath her, she began to realize that trust could exist even in the most unlikely places. Desperation. Her thoughts wandered to her family, wondering where they were and if they were searching for her.
She had been separated from them during a sudden attack on their small camp, and in the confusion she had been injured and left behind.
Birth. Now, riding on the horse, she felt a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief that she was alive, sorrow that she had been alone and afraid. The desert, which had always been a place of both wonder and danger, now seemed to stretch endlessly before her, as if testing her will to keep going. The horse moved gracefully, leaping over small rocks and maneuvering through narrow passes. Desk. She adjusted the blanket under her to ease the pain in her leg and whispered soft words to the animal. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice trembling but sincere. The horse seemed to understand, its steady gait calming her nerves and giving her courage. With each step, the distance between her and the man who had helped her grew, but she felt a strange sense of connection with him, as if a bond had formed that would last even though they were now apart. As the morning turned into late morning, the heat of the sun began to grow. The girl felt exhaustion creeping into her limbs, but she refused to stop, round in despair. She remembered the man's words. "Ride as fast as you can and don't look back." She did not look back, though she often felt the urge. Instead, she focused on the path ahead, on the hills and valleys that would eventually lead her to safety. She could see the occasional cactus and scrub brush along the trail, and the birds flying high above reminded her of the freedom she was seeking. Every mile she traveled was a small victory, a step closer to survival. Her thoughts also drifted to the stories her family had told her about courage and kindness. Her mother had often spoken of the importance of helping others, even when it was difficult, and of showing compassion in moments of fear. Now, riding on the horse, she realized that she had experienced such compassion firsthand. The man who had helped her had given her more than a horse. He had given her hope, a chance to keep moving forward, and a reminder that even in a world filled with danger, there were people who cared. She paused briefly near a small stream, letting the horse drink and catching her own breath. The water was cool and refreshing, and she leaned over to splash her face, feeling the tension in her body ease for the first time since the attack. She listened to the sound of the water flowing and the wind rustling through the leaves of a nearby mesquite tree. For a moment, the desert felt less intimidating, less lonely. But she realized that survival required not just strength and speed, but also moments of calm and reflection. She whispered a silent thanks to the horse again, grateful for its endurance and companionship. Present. Continuing her journey, she thought about the lessons she had learned in the past few hours. Life could be unpredictable, full of danger and uncertainty, but it also held unexpected acts of kindness. The man's decision to give her the horse had changed the course of her life in an instant, but she felt a renewed determination to keep moving, to honor the trust that had been placed in her. Every step forward was a promise to herself and to those who had shown her compassion that she would survive, that she would find her way back to safety. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, the desert began to change. The shadows grew shorter, and the heat intensified. The girl felt fatigue creeping into her muscles, and her leg throbbed with pain, but she refused to let it slow her down. She reminded herself that the horse had carried her this far, and with each stride she gained confidence in her ability to continue. The desert seemed less like a threat and more like a challenge, a vast space that tested courage, endurance, and determination. She met that challenge head-on, holding the reins firmly and keeping her eyes on the horizon. Along the way, she noticed signs of life, tracks of other animals, birds flitting between the rocks, and occasional patches of flowers growing resiliently in the arid soil. Each small sign reminded her that life could persist even in difficult conditions. She drew strength from this, feeling that if nature could endure, so could she. The desert, with all its harshness, became a teacher, showing her lessons of patience, resilience, and hope. She whispered to herself, "I will make it. I must make it." By late afternoon, she reached a small cluster of trees that offered shade and a chance to rest. She guided the horse to a quiet spot and allowed it to graze while she tended to her wound again, making sure the bandage was secure and clean. For her body ached, her spirit felt lighter. She had survived the morning, crossed miles of desert, and learned that courage often meant moving forward, even when fear was present. Desperate too. She looked at the horizon, imagining her family somewhere nearby, and felt a renewed determination to continue her journey. As evening approached, the sky transformed into a tapestry of oranges, pinks, and purples. The desert, once harsh and intimidating, now glowed with beauty. The girl marveled at the colors and felt a sense of calm wash over her. She realized that the day had been a test of endurance, trust, and courage, and she had passed. The man who had helped her had given her not just a horse, but a lesson in hope, and she would carry that lesson with her as she continued. Night began to fall, and the desert grew quiet except for the sounds of the horse grazing and the distant call of an owl. The girl wrapped herself in a small blanket, resting near the horse, feeling safe for the first time in what seemed like an eternity. She thought of the man one last time before sleep overtook her, silently thanking him for his courage and kindness. The desert had tested her, but she had survived, and she knew that the journey ahead, though difficult, could be faced with hope, determination, and the memory of an unexpected act of compassion. Thomas returned to his cabin after seeing the girl disappear into the desert with his last horse. The trail she had taken stretched behind him like a faint line etched into the sand, disappearing into the hills beyond. The morning had passed, and the sun was now high in the sky, warming the earth and making the shadows shrink. Thomas walked slowly, his hands brushing over the rough wooden fence posts as he moved. His mind, however, was far from the chores awaiting him. He kept thinking about the girl, her small frame on the horse, the way her eyes had looked at him with trust. He had always believed that the desert demanded strength and self-reliance. For years he had lived here alone, relying on his knowledge of the land, the rhythms of the seasons, and the companionship of his horse. But that morning had been different. That morning he had chosen to give away his last horse, the one companion he relied on more than anything else. At first he felt the emptiness of the decision pressing down on him. The trail home seemed longer without the horse beside him. Each step echoed in the quiet, reminding him of what he had given away. Sitting on the porch of his cabin, Thomas looked out at the desert that stretched endlessly before him. He remembered the way the girl had trembled when he lifted her onto the horse. He remembered the trust in her eyes, fragile yet unwavering. He thought about the pain in her leg, the fatigue she must have felt, and the fear of being alone in such a vast and dangerous place. Breaths. And yet, as he thought about it more, a quiet sense of satisfaction began to replace the anxiety. He had made a choice, and in that choice, he had given her a chance to survive. That thought brought a small, steady warmth to his heart. Hours passed, and Thomas found himself working on small tasks around the cabin, repairing fences and sorting supplies. But his mind continued to wander to the girl. He imagined her journey through the desert, the way the horse carried her over hills and valleys, and the determination she must have felt with every step. Despair, he pictured her looking out at the vast landscape, the sun above her, and the wind brushing against her face. Though he could not see her, he felt a connection, a bond formed by that single act of kindness. It was as if a part of him was riding with her, watching over her, even from a distance.
Thomas also thought about the risks he had taken.
The desert could be unforgiving, and helping someone else could have placed him in danger. But he realized that courage was not only about protecting oneself, it was about taking action when it mattered most. The girl's survival depended on his decision, and he had acted without hesitation. He felt proud of that, even though it came with a sense of loss for the horse he had given away. The horse had been his companion, a loyal and steady presence in his life, but the girl needed it more, and he had chosen compassion over comfort.
As the afternoon wore on, Thomas noticed the subtle changes in the desert.
The light softened, casting long, warm shadows across the rocks and sand. Birds flew overhead, calling to one another, and the wind rustled the leaves of the scattered trees. It was a quiet, peaceful scene, yet his thoughts remained with the girl. He wondered if she had found water, if she had rested, and if she was safe. The uncertainty gnawed at him, but he knew he could not turn back. The desert demanded resilience, and he reminded himself that she had the tools to survive grief. She had courage, a strong horse, and the hope he had given her. Night began to fall, and Thomas lit a small lantern in his cabin. The soft glow illuminated the room, casting gentle shadows on the walls. He sat down with a cup of tea, letting the warmth soothe him as he reflected on the day. He thought about how small gestures could have enormous consequences, how a single act of kindness could change the course of someone's life. The girl's life had been in danger, and now, because of him, she had a chance to continue. The thought brought a deep sense of fulfillment, and he realized that sometimes the hardest decisions were the ones that mattered most. Sleep came slowly to Thomas that night. He lay in his bed listening to the quiet sounds of the desert outside, the wind moving through the rocks and the occasional cry of a distant owl. His mind wandered between worry and hope, imagining the girl riding through the night, the stars above guiding her path. He pictured her finding shelter, resting, and gathering strength for the next day. Though they were far apart, he felt a connection that distance could not break. The bond created that morning was more enduring than he could have imagined. The next morning, Thomas rose early, as he always did. The sun painted the horizon with shades of pink and gold, and the desert seemed alive with possibility. He worked methodically, tending to the small garden and checking the fences, yet a part of his mind was always with the girl. He wondered how she was faring, whether she had found water or food, and if the journey had been as difficult as he imagined. The desert was full of challenges, but he believed in her strength and the resilience that had allowed her to survive this far. Throughout the day, Thomas reflected on the lessons he had learned from that single encounter.
Life was unpredictable, and danger could appear without warning.
Yet, in those moments, there was also the opportunity for courage, compassion, and hope. He thought about the way the girl had trusted him, how she had accepted his help without hesitation, and how her small act of bravery, simply holding on to the horse and moving forward, mirrored his own. It was a reminder that strength and courage came in many forms, and sometimes the most powerful acts were quiet and unseen. By evening, Thomas's thoughts returned again to the girl. He watched the sun dip below the horizon, turning the desert into a canvas of orange, purple, and gold. The beauty of the moment contrasted sharply with the worry that still lingered in his heart. He imagined her riding through this same landscape, feeling the wind on her face and seeing the colors stretch endlessly before her. In that moment, he realized that hope could carry a person further than fear ever could. The girl had hope, and because of that, she would endure. That night, Thomas slept more peacefully. Brrr. He dreamt of the girl riding through the desert, her eyes bright with determination, the horse moving steadily beneath her breast. He saw her reaching a place of safety, reunited with family and friends, and felt a deep sense of relief. Even though the journey was far from over, he knew that the first step had been taken, and that was all that mattered. The desert, with all its challenges, could not erase the courage, trust, and kindness that had been shared that morning. The days passed slowly for Thomas, each one filled with routine tasks, yet his thoughts always returned to the girl. He imagined her journey, the obstacles she would face, and the strength she would need to overcome them. He felt a quiet pride in having been able to help, and he realized that sometimes the most meaningful moments in life came from acts of compassion that required sacrifice. His horse had been precious, but the girl's life was more valuable, and he had chosen rightly. As the sun rose each morning, Thomas watched the desert with a careful eye, scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. He knew he could not see her, but he imagined her riding steadily, guided by the light of the sun and the memory of his kindness. The thought brought him comfort, a reassurance that his actions had made a difference. He continued with his work, tending to the cabin, the garden, and the fences, but always with a sense of hope that stretched beyond the boundaries of the land he called home. Thomas began to understand something profound about life in the desert. It was a place of challenges and solitude, yet it could also reveal the deepest truths about courage, compassion, and human connection. The encounter with the girl had reminded him that even small acts could have lasting impact, and that hope and trust could flourish even in the harshest of landscapes. Realized that the desert, with all its beauty and danger, was also a place where hearts could be tested and strengthened, and where the smallest gestures could change lives. Even as the days continued, Thomas felt the presence of that morning with him. It was a quiet, persistent reminder that his choices mattered, and that in moments of need, courage and compassion could illuminate the darkest paths. The girl's journey through the desert was a reflection of his own willingness to act, to give, and to trust. In the vastness of the landscape, their stories had intertwined, creating a connection that neither time nor distance could erase. The first hints of morning light stretched across the horizon, turning the desert into shades of soft gold and amber. The air was still cool, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and earth warmed by the sun's early rays. The young Apache girl, who had been traveling for days through the desert, felt the first warmth on her face as she guided the horse along a narrow, rocky trail.
The journey had been long and exhausting, but she now sensed that she was not alone.
There was a stirring in the air, a feeling that something important was about to happen. Her senses, sharpened by the need to survive, detected movement far ahead. But first she thought it might be another traveler, or perhaps a group of settlers. But as the figures grew closer, her heart began to beat faster with recognition and hope.
They were not strangers. They were familiar shapes, riding confidently and gracefully over the desert hills.
As they drew nearer, she realized with a mixture of joy and relief that they were her sisters. Their faces, framed by the morning sun, were filled with determination, and the horses they rode moved with a sense of purpose that mirrored her own. The girl's small hands tightened on the reins as tears filled her eyes. She had feared being alone forever, feared that the dangers of the desert would overwhelm her before she could find safety. But now, seeing her sisters riding toward her, a wave of hope and relief washed over her. She guided the horse toward them, her body trembling with exhaustion and emotion. Her sisters slowed their pace as they approached, their eyes scanning the desert until they recognized her small figure riding steadily on the horse. Then, without a word, they called out her name, their voices carrying across the quiet desert morning. The sound of their voices brought a surge of energy to the girl. She responded with a weak but joyful cry, guiding the horse faster to meet them. When she finally reached them, the three sisters enveloped her in a careful, protective embrace, their hands checking her for injuries and ensuring she was safe. The girl leaned into them, feeling the comfort and warmth of family she had feared she had lost forever. Her heart swelled with gratitude and relief, and for the first time in days, she felt truly safe. Her sisters looked at her carefully, noticing the bandage on her leg and the signs of fatigue on her face. One of them, the oldest, spoke first, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Brith, you've been through so much," she said gently, brushing a strand of hair from the girl's forehead. "But you are safe now. We will not leave your side." The girl nodded, unable to speak, her emotions too raw for words. She felt the weight of the past days, the fear, the pain, the loneliness, begin to lift as her sisters guided her forward. Thomas, who had been tending to his cabin and observing the desert from afar, saw the figures approaching and recognized the movement immediately. Though he remained hidden at a distance, he felt a mixture of curiosity and relief. The sight of the three riders, confident and strong, carrying a sense of purpose, reassured him that the girl would be safe. He watched as they approached her, the morning sun casting their long shadows across the desert floor. It was a quiet, powerful moment. A reunion filled with emotion, hope, and the enduring strength of family bonds. The sisters helped the girl to dismount and led the horse carefully, understanding the depth of her exhaustion. They moved with a calm and steady energy, speaking softly among themselves and occasionally glancing at the girl to ensure she was all right. The horse, sensing the change in attention, remained calm, allowing the sisters to guide it as gently as they could. The girl looked at the animal with gratitude, remembering the kindness of the man who had given her the horse. Without his help, she would not have been able to survive the harsh desert journey and reach her sisters. The sisters led the girl to a small, shaded area near a cluster of rocks where they could rest and regroup. They offered her water and small pieces of food, and she drank and ate with the eagerness of someone who had been deprived for far too long. As she rested, her sisters spoke softly of the journey ahead, sharing knowledge of the safest paths through the desert and the places where water could be found. Their voices carried a sense of authority and care, guiding the girl with both love and experience. She listened intently, knowing that their guidance would help her continue safely. While the girl rested, one of the sisters, the middle child, looked toward the distant horizon with sharp eyes. "We must continue soon," she said. "The desert is vast, and we cannot stay in one place for long. Danger can appear when we least expect it." The girl nodded, understanding the wisdom in her words. She felt stronger now, surrounded by family and filled with a renewed determination to face whatever lay ahead. Her exhaustion remained, but it was tempered by the comfort of safety and the support of her sisters. The oldest sister, noticing the bandaged leg, knelt beside the girl and carefully examined the wound. "Bah." She spoke softly, her fingers gentle as she checked for swelling or signs of infection. Breaths.
"You have been brave," she said, her voice full of respect. "But we will take care of you now."
"You need to regain your strength before the journey continues." The girl nodded, feeling a deep sense of relief. She had survived the harshest part of her journey alone, and now her family was here to guide and protect her.
As the sun climbed higher, the sisters helped the girl remount the horse, leading it carefully so that her leg would not be strained further.
They moved together with coordination and purpose, their bond evident in every movement. The girl felt a profound sense of gratitude and love, not just for her sisters, but also for the stranger who had given her the horse. Without him, she would not have survived the desert long enough to be reunited with her family. She held the reins tightly, guiding the horse alongside her sisters, each step a testament to resilience, courage, and the enduring power of family. As they traveled together, the girl's mind reflected on the kindness she had received. She understood that the man who had helped her had taken a great risk, and she felt a deep sense of respect and gratitude. His act of compassion had given her the chance to survive, the chance to reach her sisters, and the opportunity to continue her journey. She realized that courage and kindness could appear in unexpected places, and that trust, once given, could create bonds that lasted beyond distance and time. The sisters rode steadily, speaking in soft tones and pointing out landmarks that would guide them safely. The girl felt her confidence growing with every step, the knowledge and experience of her family helping her navigate the desert with care. The horse moved gracefully beneath her, strong and steady, a reminder of the kindness that had made this reunion possible. Breath. The desert, once a place of fear and uncertainty, now seemed alive with possibility, filled with the promise of safety and guidance. By late morning, the sisters led the girl to a hidden valley known to their family, a place with a small stream and patches of shade where they could rest and prepare for the next stage of their journey. They helped her down from the horse, offering her water and guiding her to a comfortable spot. The girl sat quietly, taking in the surroundings and reflecting on how far she had come. She had survived the desert, reunited with her sisters, and learned the power of trust, courage, and compassion. As the day progressed, the sisters spoke of the future, of the paths they would take, and of the care they would provide to ensure the girl's continued safety. Their words were filled with hope and determination, guiding her not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. She listened intently, absorbing every word, every gesture, and every sign of care. But in that moment, she felt a profound sense of connection, not only to her sisters but to the world around her, to the kindness of strangers, and to the enduring power of human compassion. The girl knew that her journey was far from over, but she also knew that she was no longer alone. With her sisters by her side, she felt a renewed sense of strength and purpose. The desert, once a place of fear and isolation, had become a landscape of resilience, hope, and reunion. But she thought of the man who had given her the horse, and felt a deep sense of gratitude, knowing that his small act of kindness had set in motion a chain of events that had led her back to her family. The sun was just rising over the desert when Thomas stepped out of his cabin, carrying a small bundle of supplies he had prepared for the day. The air was crisp, and the horizon glowed with soft shades of gold and pink breaths. He had been thinking about the girl every moment since the day he had given her the horse. Even though he could not see her, he felt her presence in his thoughts. He wondered how she was doing, if she had found water, if she had rested, and if she had made progress through the desert. Every small sound, the distant call of a bird, the rustling of leaves, reminded him of the fragility and beauty of life in this vast open land. That morning, as Thomas walked slowly along the ridge near his cabin, he noticed movement far in the distance. Dust swirled around 3 riders approaching across the flat stretches of the desert, their shapes becoming clearer with each step. Thomas squinted, shielding his eyes from the sun, and his heart leapt. The riders moved with confidence and purpose, their horses steady and strong. As they drew closer, he realized they were the girl's sisters. Relief flooded through him. She was safe, and her family had come to guide her. He stayed at a distance, not wanting to intrude, but he could see the moment of reunion clearly. The girl, riding his horse, guided it carefully as her sisters approached. When they finally met, they embraced her gently, their voices soft and full of emotion. Thomas watched silently, his chest tightening with a mix of pride, relief, and quiet happiness. He had been worried about her survival, but seeing the strength and love of her family gave him a sense of peace he had not felt in days. This small act, the gift of a horse, had changed the course of her life, and now he could see the result. The sisters helped the girl dismount, guiding her carefully and making sure her leg was secure. They spoke softly, offering words of comfort and encouragement. The girl looked at Thomas from the corner of her eye, a mixture of gratitude and acknowledgement shining in her gaze. He nodded slightly, smiling, though he kept his distance. In that moment he understood that his role in her journey had been temporary, but its impact would last forever. Bah! He had given her the tools to survive, and now she had found the love and guidance of her family once more. As they moved together, Thomas noticed the small gestures that spoke volumes. One of the sisters left a bundle of dried herbs and food near the girl, a practical offering to help her continue safely. Another held the horse's reins for a moment, checking that it was calm and steady. Every action was deliberate, careful, and full of love. Thomas realized that acts of kindness, whether from strangers or family, had a ripple effect. His choice to give the horse had enabled this reunion, and now their combined care would ensure the girl's continued safety. The girl and her sisters prepared to move again, planning the safest route through the desert. They spoke quietly among themselves, pointing out landmarks and small paths that would lead them to water and shelter. Thomas watched as they set off, their figures becoming small against the vast open landscape. The girl looked back one last time, her eyes meeting his, and in that silent exchange a bond was reaffirmed. She had survived, she was safe, and she carried with her the memory of compassion shown by someone she barely knew. Thomas turned back toward his cabin, feeling a mixture of emptiness and fulfillment. The desert seemed quieter now, as if it too acknowledged the significance of the reunion. He thought about the lessons he had learned in the past days, that courage could take many forms, that compassion had the power to change lives, and that trust, once placed, could bridge gaps that fear and distance often created. The memory of the girl's eyes, the trust she had shown, and the relief in her reunion with her sisters stayed with him, filling him with a quiet, enduring sense of purpose. The day unfolded slowly, with Thomas tending to his cabin and reflecting on the events that had changed so much in a short time. He realized that life in the desert was unpredictable, full of challenges, but also filled with opportunities to make a difference. One small act, a decision to help someone in need, could create consequences that echoed far beyond what one could imagine. Possibility. He felt a deep sense of humility and gratitude, understanding that while he had acted out of kindness, the outcome was also shaped by courage, trust, and the strength of the girl and her sisters. As evening approached, Thomas prepared a small fire outside his cabin. He sat quietly, watching the sky turn deep shades of orange and purple. The desert, once a place of fear and uncertainty, now seemed to him a landscape filled with lessons. He thought about the girl's journey, her bravery, and the resilience she had shown. He understood that survival was not just about physical endurance, but also about hope, courage, and the willingness to trust others when the world seemed harsh and unforgiving. That night, Thomas reflected on the interconnectedness of life. He thought about how the smallest gestures could carry immense significance. A gift, a moment of kindness, a decision made from the heart. These could ripple outward, affecting lives in ways one could never fully know. Breath. He realized that while he had given the horse, the girl had given him something in return, a reminder of the power of trust, courage, and human connection. The desert, with all its vastness, had witnessed an act of compassion that would live on far beyond that morning. As the stars appeared in the night sky, Thomas felt a profound sense of peace. He thought of the girl riding safely with her sisters, the bond between them strengthened by this journey, and the promise of care and guidance that would ensure her future. He understood that the act of giving, even when it required personal sacrifice, was never wasted. The life he had touched had been preserved and nurtured, and the memory of that moment would stay with him forever. The following morning, Thomas rose early and walked to the edge of the desert. Sun rose slowly, casting its golden light across the hills and valleys. He imagined the girl and her sisters traveling safely, guided by love, wisdom, and the small gift that had made all the difference. Rest. He felt a quiet joy, knowing that his choice had enabled this reunion and ensured her safety. In that moment, he understood the true meaning of compassion. It was not about recognition or reward, but about creating opportunities for others to survive, thrive, and continue their journey. Narration. Thomas spent the rest of the day tending to his cabin, repairing fences and preparing supplies. Yet his thoughts often wandered to the girl and her sisters. He imagined their voices, their laughter, and the careful steps they took to protect one another. He pictured the horse moving steadily beneath them, a reminder of the power of kindness and the courage that had enabled the journey.
Each thought reinforced his understanding that even in a world filled with challenges, small acts of goodness could create lasting change.
Weeks later, Thomas received word from a neighboring family that the girl and her sisters had reached a safe settlement, far beyond the desert. They were healthy, reunited with other family members, and thriving. Thomas felt a deep sense of fulfillment and quiet pride. The horse he had given had carried her to safety, and the compassion he had shown had changed the course of a young life. He realized that true courage often went unnoticed, but its impact could be immense. Acts of kindness, no matter how small, could ripple outward and touch lives in ways that were immeasurable. As the desert winds whispered through the rocks and trees around his cabin, Thomas understood that the story of that morning, the gift of the last horse, the trust of a young girl, and the reunion with her sisters, was a lesson that would stay with him forever. It was a story of courage, compassion, and the enduring power of human connection. In the vast expanse of the desert, where life could be harsh and unforgiving, he had learned that one act of kindness could illuminate the darkest paths, bring hope to those in need, and create bonds that lasted a lifetime. Bomis looked out across the horizon one final time that evening, feeling a quiet sense of peace. The desert stretched endlessly before him, filled with both challenges and possibilities. He thought of the girl riding safely with her sisters, her future secured by courage, love, and trust. And he knew deep in his heart that his choice had mattered. The desert, the rising sun, the journey of a young girl, and the kindness of a stranger had all come together to create a story of hope, humanity, and the enduring strength of compassion.